My name is Sister Constance, and I'm now in the development office at St. Matthew's School on Cotman Avenue in Northeast Philadelphia.
And I'm Sister Jeannette, and I'm also in the development office at St. Matthew.
And we're still on a learning curve here. We're
Yes.
still learning more about our wonderful families and children, and so we have a lot of dreaming to do now as we learn more about this new place.
Yes.
It's wonderful.
Yes. At St. Francis de Sales in 1984, we were sent as principal, Sister Constance, and 8th grade teacher, myself, Sister Jeannette. And after a while, we began to realize the need for a development program, and we started that. So for 23 years, we, in addition to our jobs, did a development program. Then in August of 2016, we were sent here to St. Matthew in the far northeast, I guess, and we were sent to start a development program here, not principal and 8th grade teacher also.
Just a little bit of background first. When we went there 31 years ago, the school enrollment had gone from 1,400 down to 400 in the previous 20 years. So we had 2 of every grade, but in some of those classrooms there were only 15 children. So after assessing the situation, I went to the pastor and I said, do you want us to just let the enrollment keep going down as it has for the last 20 years? Or fill these classrooms and keep 2 of every classroom? And he said, keep the 2 classes, you go for it, whatever you have to do to fill them.
So we started.
So our goal was not only to retain students, but it was to increase the enrollment. And so over the next 3 years, we increased the enrollment to over 500 children, and we maintained between 500 and 525 for the next 20 years,
Yes.
which made it very easy to budget, because each year we budget for 500 children. We were all right financially because we were able to maintain that kind of an enrollment.
Well, first of all, it's a good distinction that you say challenge and not problem, because it makes all the difference how you look at it. Challenges you can go after and work on. At that school, because the enrollment was going down, children with discipline problems had been kept in the school to keep the numbers up. And because of that, the word got around that anything goes there, and parents were afraid to send their children. So Sister Constance started to weed out those discipline problems, and the word changed. So eventually, the enrollment began to go up. So that was important. We also worked really hard on building the pride in the school, helping everybody, the kids, the teachers, everybody, to love being there every day, love coming to school. They had been kind of overwhelmed, and we'll tell you about the boat children we had later on, which added to that, but every school has its own distinct challenges.
Another part that's really important is keeping the tuition rates reasonable. Over the years, we've watched some schools close because the pastors raised the tuition $400 and $500 a year. He immediately lost more enrollment and ended up in worse situation. So to keep it reasonable, we raised it something every year, but we tried to keep it reasonable. And the second thing is that we had a system for making sure we collected all the tuition. And that's very hard in a school where everybody's poor. But a parent would come and say, I'm a single parent and this is hard for me. And I would say, I know it's really hard because it's we poor. You know, half the parents are single parents. We're all poor in this school. And so in order to keep it going, we have to collect the tuition. And so it's not to be mean, because we never wanted to be mean to our parents. We love them. But we tried to, I sent a letter out to the parents saying, look at all the schools around that are closing. It would be misguided charity to not collect the tuition. My job is to be here to make sure this school is still here for your child to graduate from. And if we want to do that, it's misguided charity to let it go. We have to collect the tuition. And so that's one of the things that's, I think, really important to keep on it. And we used to send letters out, every 2 weeks to the 20 most delinquent. And not necessarily say we need it all, but we need this much by next week or whatever, or you're going to be suspended. Now, giving them enough time and making it reasonable,
Yes.
very rarely did they have to be suspended, but we knew that in order to keep the school going, we had to collect what needed to be collected.
And if they called you to say there was some special circumstance,
You would be
of course we always
understanding
listen.
of that, yes. I can tell you that research shows that in city schools, for parents, safety is number one. That's what research shows. So you need to advertise that you have safety standards within your school. The doors are locked, there's cameras outside, you can't just get in the little school where there are only kindergarten first, no parent can get in that building, they can't ring the bell and have it answered. The security of those little children, they have to come to the main office, we would call over and say somebody's coming, but they would never answer a blind door. We had all kinds of security systems set up because safety is number one. And the other is, that Sister Jeannette will talk about in a few minutes, is we created a peace program, which we almost totally eliminated fighting. And so that's another safety issue for parents. Another one that we did that I think was important in the area we were in is we did not have an answering machine on the phone. Somebody answered that phone all day, and especially the last 15 minutes. Sometimes it would happen, and we heard it from other schools, a parent would call 5 minutes before dismissal and say, don't let my child go because I'm going to be late today, I don't want them on the corner, or send them down to the hairdressers to wait there till I come. Well, at dismissal time, you might not hear it till 15 minutes later, and then you're responsible because you didn't respond. But if the phone isn't answered or it's busy, the parents know the message didn't get through, and they have to try something else. That's saved a lot of misunderstandings. Because parents are frantic when they're at work and something happens. So they could either get through or they knew they didn't get through. They couldn't just leave it on a tape that might not get listened to for another time. So something else we did when we were interviewing teachers. You're coming into inner city schools and I would say, we want your blood, sweat, and tears and you're going to get paid peanuts. But it's worth it. It's like joining the Peace Corps, only you can go home every day. So it's a real ministry to be able to do that. And so we wanted teachers that were committed to that. And then when we got there wasn't a music teacher, an art teacher, a gym teacher. There were no special activities, and we began to work on trying to get them in. Because the more activities you have, the different children can have different interests. And some can excel in art, some in music, some in sports, etc. But we also worked on academic excellence. And the idea was children can do anything if you believe in them. So we never watered anything down. Even though we were dealing with immigrant children and children speaking 16 or 17 different languages, we still went the whole way.
Another thing that motivated them to re-enroll, we think, was building of that school spirit, so they wanted to stay. They had a stake in this school. For example, anytime we had a special event going on, we would get the kids to call the TV stations, the radio stations, and invite them. And they would frequently come because how can you say no to some child really excited? It was their event that we're proclaiming. We had student ambassadors, and visitors loved this. They would wait and take these visitors on a tour of the school. But before we would ever take a visitor, we had to make sure that teachers and classrooms were ready for visitors. We made some mistakes, but then the children were able to talk to them, to tell them their plans, their goals in life, what they were involved in. And frequently, these visitors would just be so impressed. And one man said, I'm blown away by this, that they would want to invest in the school, either their time or their talent or their treasure. And that helped a lot because we were able to build up some tuition pots because they wanted to sponsor a student, and that was really important. We also, another thing is to get them involved in the children's scholarship things. It makes kind of like a group in the school. They're special. Involve them in the art contest, the essays, the favorite teacher, the most wonderful parent or volunteer. There are all ways. We were really blessed to have one graduate who said that she would volunteer. She just took total care of our children's scholarship children. One of the things she did also, in addition to getting them ready to sign the papers when it was coming through, she would call parents and remind them about the absence and lateness. And that was really, it was a gift to us that she was willing to do that. But they kind of like were special, these children's scholarship families. So that was an involvement also, to continue to remain in the school as part of this.
That's very good that you say those costs, because when we got there, we had nothing. We were on the dole from downtown, and we had nothing extra to work with. But one of the things that I did in the beginning as the principal is I appointed Sister Jeannette as the contest coordinator, because things like that come in all the time for all different grade levels. Some teachers do it and some don't. But I had somebody who was willing to work her tail off at the school. And so I gave all of those to her.
And then I picked up on it, and I worked on these contests, and I would go to teachers, appropriate grade levels, And if they weren't interested, I would get some of the kids from their classrooms. We joined every contest. I mean, we joined the smile contest and the chemistry contest and speech and art, and we won. And in the beginning, the pastor, we won first, second, and third place in the first contest we entered. And he said, what happened? Didn't anybody else join the contest? He didn't have expectations, and neither did the kids. But it changed, believe me. They won everything on their merit. And then we did something very important. We celebrated it. Sister Constance would get on the PA and announce it, and everybody was clapping all over the school. Mm-hmm. But then we would get it into the local newspapers. Now, you never want to, well, not never, but I mean, it's not as important to get something in the Philadelphia Inquirer. That's out there. We did everything for the local neighborhood newspapers. And the kids would say to me, well, how did they know our names? When you have a local newspaper, you don't have reporters or anything. You're just probably on a shoestring budget. So I would write every article, take the pictures, write the headline, and make sure that our school name was in the headline, and send that into the paper. They were thrilled to have something from the neighborhood, and parents saw St. Francis de Sales, St. Francis de Sales, day after day. It would be in there. We want the front page. We don't want to pay for an ad. And that's a really important way to get your name out there. And then the kids in the neighborhoods are proud. I want to stay at that school. This is really a wonderful place to be. And we were so intent on doing this that in the beginning, Sister Constance used to go to the classroom. She'd just pass by and she'd say, DeSales, and they would say, is number one.
DeSales is number one. We train, we have them, we mess with their mind, she always says.
Yes, but then one time, early on, a little boy said to her, what are you? Are you a cheerleader or the new principal?
I said, I'm both. Yes. Something else we did rather early on, too, is we had a breakfast for all the real estate agents in the neighborhood. Because if you're in a neighborhood where it's changing, there's a lot of sales going on, and also we had big apartment buildings that are being rented and the people in and out, things like that. So they were the first ones to meet the new people in the neighborhood, the real estate agents. So we presented everything about the school, gave them all the information about the school, because many times when parents are moving into a neighborhood, they ask, where's the local school, right, what is it, whatever. And so to make sure real estate agents are on your list and that they know what's happening in the school. So they came to the breakfast. We found out that they met once a month in the neighborhood. It was a custom there. So we said, come to the convent for breakfast for your next meeting. And that's what we did.
Breakfast is cheaper than lunch or dinner.
It is. We found that out too. Something else we did in the very beginning too, and after a while we didn't need to do that because we had a waiting list that got to be so long, but to visit the daycare centers. There are daycare centers in your neighborhood. Some of them have a kindergarten, but some of them don't, and you want them in your kinder or your first grade. And so I was invited to talk at a nursery school graduation. And I went and talked, because that was a way to get more people interested in your school.
And in fact, let me interrupt. One time we found out that a local daycare was telling their prospective parents that if they put their children in that daycare, they automatically could come to St. Francis de Sales. Well,
I had to go and speak with them because they did bus children to our place and pick them up after school at the daycare, but I had to say, we do the deciding. One person that we didn't accept was really upset. They said they guaranteed me at this daycare that if I went to their daycare, they would automatically be accepted. So, most of the time you can do that, but you can't let another school, another situation call the shots for you. Something else we were told in our training is that if you have only 2 people on a waiting list, you advertise that you have a waiting list. That's really important. Even if it's very small, just say we have a waiting list. It helps to keep up enrollment. It gets people to register early because they re-register, so we don't give their place to new people, and it gets it more in demand. And I mentioned before about tuition, and that's another point of it is that if you keep the increase small and collect it all, which we talked about before, but don't let them get too far behind because they get overwhelmed. Poor people get overwhelmed with the stress and they owe $1,000 and then they just take them out because they can't do it. But one of the things we did is I would call them on the phone and say, well, if you can send in 100, I have someone that gave me money to match the 100. I would get some people to help us, those that are struggling, because sometimes they start out and they're fine and they lose their job in the middle of the year. Well, they need extra help. It's not even children's scholarship or something else. So we tried to have a pot to do matching. If you send in 200, I'll match 200. Well, sometimes they'd go borrow that money just to have it to get the match because it meant so much. And that kind of thing helps when they're in the middle of the year. You don't start out the year that way, but as you know, in January, maybe you're calling someone and saying, I have a grant just to help struggling parents, and that would help get some of more of the tuition in.
Another thing about talking about retention was being positive, building this atmosphere in the school. And we mentioned the peace program. We realized that children didn't want to fight, but there weren't many options for them. So we made a place, a room, a peace room, and there was a peace table. And they could come and sit at this peace table to talk about what was the problem between them. Oftentimes parents would call Sister Constance and they would say, could you get my child to the peace table? They're not getting along with so-and-so. And so that atmosphere was created. In addition to that, we had a peace wall. And we would nominate once a week any children who were nominated for being good or trying to be good. Not angels, kids who were trying to be good. And one of the things we had to do was convince teachers to look for the good, because sometimes teachers get a little bit negative and they don't see the good. So it was a work in process all the time. We didn't have a demerit system there. And if you think about it, philosophically, that's a great difference. If you're looking for the good, that's over here. If you're looking for the bad, for a demerit, it's almost like saying, this is what we want to find. So that shift makes a difference, and you're building this environment that kids and parents want to be part of and want to continue to be. But you do have to deal with discipline problems. And one of the things that Sister Constance did, and I thought this was so good, I only found out about it after the fact. If a new student was coming in, or if a child was in the school already and there was a problem with their behavior, she would very quietly get the parent and the child and make a deal with them, sign a contract. That put the onus on that young man or young woman to change their ways. But she never told the teachers. So if somebody was coming in your room new, you didn't know whether they had a terrible background report. That was very good. And we saw it year after year of kids who responded to this.
Getting a second chance.
They got a second chance, that was
But
it.
they weren't going to get 25 chances, but they got more than one or two. Yeah.
But they did change their ways. And along that same line, bullying has to be handled right away. You have to do something about it. Does it take time? Yes. A teacher could just say, go sit over there in that corner, or I'm going to tell your mother, instead of allowing them the opportunity to talk about it at this peace table or somewhere. That's harder. It takes more effort on everybody's part. But you can't just let bullying go on, because it builds and it becomes known and it gets out there that they don't do anything about it. So,
one of the things that we said in regard to that is that I would go to the classrooms and say, you see on TV a set of keys, and it would say, friends don't let friends get drive drunk. And I would say, friends don't let friends get hurt. Friends don't let friends get suspended. So if there's going to be a fight, you let us know, because if they're your friends, you don't want them hurt, you don't want them suspended. So we changed the atmosphere. They were more willing to come. And if they settled it without fighting at the peace table, they weren't suspended, they weren't hurt, we didn't even call their parents. They could solve it right there. And so that made a good atmosphere for them. And it did almost totally eliminate fighting.
Yes.
Because before, in the school area, the crowds get him. Well, by last year, there was 2 fights, I think, the whole year, and one happened at the corner, and the other kids brought them back and said they shouldn't have been doing this. We stopped them, but they brought them back and to get it settled, to the peace table, to get it settled. Okay? So the last, I guess, couple of things we wanted to say is, I learned a lot by listening to parents and to children. You think you have all the answers, but if you listen to them, one of the things that I listened to that surprised me a few years ago, we had trolleys near us, so I was never in favor. We got trans passes for the children. The school district would do it if they lived more than 1.5 miles. That's the city rule, or busing. But we had trolleys, and I didn't want 20 buses in front of school. And so we went for the trans passes. And then a couple years ago, a parent was coming to our school, and she lived in our neighborhood, and the child was in the other Catholic school farther away. And she had her there, but then the tuition got to be so high there, she was making a change. And I said, how come you sent her there? And she said, well, sister, if she was going to take the trolley, she had to walk 3 blocks to the trolley and stand and wait. And when she got off the trolley, she had to walk 3 blocks to school. That other school has busing. They picked her up in front of the house and they let her off right in front of the door of the school. Safety. I didn't have to worry about her. And I thought, if I were the principal today, I probably, listening to that, would go more for the buses. Because safety is so important to parents when they're at work all day and they want to know that their child is safe every minute. And in connection to that, this year I sat at the table at the Children's Scholarship Fair for everyone, and every paper I had was given out, but every single parent, to the last one that came to that table, asked me if there were busing for our school.
Yes.
So it's more of a priority than it was before, but every single parent asked me that. And so it again goes back, if I had it to do over,
Yes.
I'm not the principal here, and I was no longer the principal there, just working development, but busing and the safety of children is so important to
Yes.
parents.
Yes.
So that's something. The other is that you say, know your neighborhood and try to do the things that will respond to your neighborhood. If you live in South Philly, I'm told that people gather on the corners all the time. You get the lead mother to talk up your school on the corners. When I was out in the suburbs, they had community swimming pools, and I called it the apostolate of the swimming pools. Parents get the new parents that move in the summer and talk to them. But here, where we were, the best information is going to be kept in laundromats, because they go to the laundromat and sit there for a long time. And so you would read that information. We put it in the store windows along the main streets. We had an adult do that, put them on the telephone poles, and all kinds of things like that to say. But you have to say, what is important in your neighborhood? When we were giving this talk in New York, we were telling them to take them and put them on the steps down to the subway, because everybody got everywhere. Where were we, in the Bronx? Yonkers, wherever we were. You say, what is your neighborhood like? Where can you put these things? We never sent children to do it just in case. But they were in barbershop windows and everywhere, and then we had them in Spanish and English, and this man would take them to the Spanish neighborhood and put them in all of the Spanish stores and everything. And so that helps to let people know. Sometimes they ride by a big sign, by the time they get home they forget the phone number, but if they have a flyer, some of them came into school with the flyer in their hand. They found it on the windshield of their car, or they took it off the telephone pole near their house. And so that that helped. But you have to say, wherever you are in Philadelphia, what is the most important thing, or where do people gather and when?
Yes, yes.
And if it's a why, ask the why if you can put the information there. If there's funeral parlors nearby, some people put them in funeral parlors because so many are going in there. You say, what's important in your neighborhood? Where do people gather?
Mm-hmm.
If we were way out on the main line, there aren't even any laundromats out there, but you wouldn't put them there. But you have to say, where do people go? Barbershops. Barbershops are like friendly neighborhood places. People go all the time to the same place, I find out with that. So all of these things we would hope would help someone, because we believe in good education for children. And so the bottom line we were taught is the word is CASE. C-A-S-E. Copy and steal everything. Everything we said. If there's anything you want to do, and if there's anything else you want to ask, you can contact him or you can contact us, and we'll see if we can help you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So you think the best, you think and want the most for your children. You've got to have a dream. If you don't have a dream, how you gonna make a dream come true?